Hi there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Erin from Everlearning, Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, and myself, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, consent-based learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
So I have to say to both of you that when I think about, I'm going to guess a little bit here, but what I imagine one of the benefits would be to starting during the pandemic is possibly a lot less feeling of being under attack from people for the decision, because, I think for me, that's definitely been the most difficult part of home education in general. And part of that could have been the era that we started in, right? So it was 2003, 2002, 2003. So it was less common to begin with. But I still think that there was something about the pandemic that made it a little bit more okay to make that decision. I think it gave a little bit of a push, where maybe people can say, well, we just really enjoyed this time and we decided to keep going. Whereas I think for families that decided to begin homeschooling outside of any sort of world event, there's just a lot of explaining you have to do because people really don't understand, like, why would you do this? So yeah, I do wonder about that. And I have felt a little bit of envy about that, I have to be honest. And I'm also, two-part question. I'm also interested in whether you think that your background as teachers has made any difference, because that's a huge question people get as well. Are you trained to do this? Are you a trained teacher? Are you certified? How will you know what you're doing? So, yeah.
Ashley said it earlier. I think that people always, oh yeah, of course you can do this because you're a teacher. I get that all the time as well. And I've never had a single person doubt my decision to homeschool. And part of that, I think, is because of the people that I choose to associate with. I'm around a lot of open-minded, amazing friends and family. So I just am very lucky to have that kind of support in the first place. But I do think the teaching thing has a lot to do with it. And it's false. I mean, it is obviously false. Like, you do not need to be a teacher to home educate. And it's just as much true that anyone can become a teacher. So, there's what I learned in my studies of becoming a teacher, there was a lot of psychology and child development, of course, but I think a lot of homeschooling parents do that sort of research. And they inform themselves about how kids learn. And so they're just as educated as we would be in that regard. And then most of what you learn about teaching comes through practice with kids and actually doing the thing. So if you're doing the thing with your kids, it's a perfect example of unschooling, really, isn't it? Because you do the thing and you're interested in the thing. You learn how to do it. So yeah, I think that's, a false sense of security to think that, oh yeah, being a teacher, like, officially gives you this like stamp of, approval. Yes, you're qualified. It's just silly.
Yeah, I agree. I never knew how to respond when someone would say that, because I had a lot of mixed feelings about it, but it's really true. You do not have to be a teacher. And I feel like what I learned, like, my teaching background didn't teach me how to home educate my children. I don't know what other people, like non-teachers, think teachers know how to do. Like, I even think now, I've never taught my own class. I've only ever worked as an occasional teacher. So if I have to go in and teach, like, say I take a job where I teach a grade 5 class for a year, I have a lot of learning to do, and I'm going to do most of that next to them. So, I mean, that's just what we're doing with our kids at home. Yeah, exactly what Jenna said. We have the background, but parents learn so much about that stuff as well. There was something, I was thinking in regards to a benefit to starting home education during the pandemic and being isolated, and not like, while that was a challenge, not being in person with other homeschool families, I think when I was thinking about it before today, I think there was a benefit to that where it kind of gave me the space to really just focus on our own journey and what worked for us. Whereas if I had been around more homeschool parents and hearing about them talk about Charlotte Mason and all, different curriculums and different approaches, and I think that would have really influenced me more than I'd like to admit. And that would have played a real big factor, whereas I didn't have any of that at all. And so I was able to really just pay attention to my kids and what seemed to work for us, and then turn to, the books and the podcasts that made sense to me. I chose them. I didn't even have people recommending them. And I was able to go down that, really was like my own unschooling journey about unschooling. So I think that was actually a benefit. As far as having family and friends like question our decision to home educate, and for the few that know that we unschool, because I usually just say we homeschool. Like when I meet someone or they ask, I just use the term homeschool, because I didn't know the term unschooling more than 2 years ago myself. But I'm lucky, like our family is very supportive, or not brave enough to question us. I'm not sure. I was talking to a couple other homeschool friends this morning, like just today, about this, how I've actually noticed this past school year, I've stopped being asked a lot. For a while there, it was, there was virtual school for everyone. And then most of the kids went back to school. And then I don't know I don't know why. I don't know what changed. But I feel like now people, all of a sudden, they're becoming more uncomfortable again asking about it. I think that's what's happening. Like even not like super close friends, but friends I see on a regular basis, they're not asking anymore. They're not asking, hey, how's homeschooling going? It's like a topic that's become avoided, or at least that's how I'm perceiving it, which I'm finding really interesting. And a couple of my friends said that it was similar for them as well. So I thought, well, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe because most of the kids have gone back to school, and even the ones who kind of home educated a little bit longer, they're all going back. And so I wonder, I'm sure there's questions and thoughts, but they're not coming towards me, which is a little bit of a shame, because I'm happy to talk about it. Give me the opportunity. So yeah, there is a little bit of that still, I find.
That is interesting. It also makes me wonder about the age thing, Ashley. Your oldest is 8?
Yeah.
I don't know. I found that when we first made the decision, it was a big thing. People had so it was kind of like the JK thing. There were lots of questions. And then again at grade 1. And then we kind of sailed for a few years. And then it was more when we got to like grade 7 and 8 that people, the questions began again. So who knows? It might even be a little bit related to age, right? Because I think there are these milestones that people are kind of like, okay, well, they're going to do this for this amount of time, but I wonder about, grade 1, or I wonder about high school. Yeah, just a thought. But
yeah, no, I think you're right. And that's my friends and I, the conversation kind of went in that direction today, and people, maybe having more comfort around younger children being at home during the earlier years. But then, things have to get more serious and you have to buckle down. And at some point you have to go to school. And I think a lot of that is just a lack of awareness that even myself, I probably would have had if we weren't home educating and we had to send the kids back to school. I think sometimes I am glad people don't ask, like people out that we run into in the neighborhood and stuff don't ask, because I almost find I don't know where to even start. Because I feel like I have, and I'm sure, Jenna, you can relate to this, like I've dived deep into this topic and into this world and into this community, that it's hard for me to remember where I was only a couple of years ago. So when somebody's like, well, tell me a little bit about unschooling, I'm like, I don't know where to start for you, because I've gone so far that I'm like, give me a minute. And it's not an easy thing for me to explain. So I like send them to your podcast or something like that. So maybe not being asked the question now actually works for me. And then I will, when they start maybe asking again as the boys get older, I'll be able to formulate a little bit better of an answer for them. I need like an elevator pitch.
A little.
I always wonder if people who are like, maybe criticizing in their mind about what we're doing, if they have actually listened to my podcast and then think I'm so far gone that they're like, I'm just not going to address this topic with Jenna because she is off the deep end. So I kind of, and that's the great thing about actually having the podcast, because I can just be like, well, I talk a lot about it and da, da, da. But I've had homeschoolers, ask me about what we're doing and stuff. And I'm like, well, I have a podcast. It does make it easy. You just need a podcast, Ashley.
It's funny. I would love it if Kiki was here, because I think that's probably at least one reason as to why she has started a podcast, because we like talking about this stuff because we're interested in it, but we need to talk to people who are also interested in it. Otherwise, it's just too difficult.
Yeah.
I think also how much time you have with the person who's asking, right? So you have the ask off the cuff and you're thinking, well, we have a minute. You're just asking. So I need that 1 or 2 sentences. And then if it's somebody who you think, maybe is genuinely interested and you have a little more time, it's a bit easier, but it's making that call when people ask, how interested are you actually, and how much time do we have? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
We like one thing that I usually say, I just realized, I'm like, oh yeah, this is usually how I explain it. I say that I don't mention unschooling because, like you say, I just don't think people are aware of what that means, but they can kind of wrap their head around the idea of self-directed education because it has it in the name, so we just say like, we kind of let Logan choose his, what he wants to learn about. And then, that's it. That's like, they're like, okay. And then if they're really like wanting that longer explanation, you'll get the follow-up questions, but most of the time that suffices. People are like, oh, okay, I get it, But I wanted to say also one of the things I wanted to mention that was a positive, because I said a lot of negative, and I think that just is our experience with it. I mean, obviously I'm so happy that we're homeschooling and it worked out in a lot of ways, but one of the really good positive things was, and this may not be true for everybody, but my husband was home because of the pandemic as well. And what was interesting is I think about what it would have been like if he had been working all day and then coming home and hearing about the learning process and having me like relay that to him versus him actually witnessing and observing it. And then us having loads of extra time, because there's no commute and all of that to talk about it. And there was a lot of apprehension from his part. I mean, this was so hard because I was doing the absorbing of the knowledge about unschooling, and then I was relaying what I was learning. And he was not on board, at the beginning. He was like, okay, I understand, but, there was always a but. And, but I think over time, there would be instances, for example, where like one example is our son's computer wasn't working and he wanted to fix it. I mean, his games are on there. So like, that's really important to him. And I don't know anything about fixing computers. So he worked with my dad, who is more knowledgeable, and like took the whole computer apart, blah, 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 like tried to figure it out. They weren't successful, but who cares about that? They learned a lot. He learned a lot about the mechanisms of the computer and how it's put together. And I was like, there's an example right there. Like, and there were many situations like that, but I was able to show him, like he can observe it for himself. And it made our relationship less tense because we were on board. We were like both like seeing the things happening, and it wasn't just me dictating what was happening at home. And like, yeah, it was concrete, for him to see it and actually believe it. So that was a huge positive. And I don't know how it would look alternatively, right? If he had gone to work and I was just describing, maybe it would have been better. I don't even, maybe it would have been like, oh yes, this is amazing. It's working well. And he would have no idea. But I do think that it made us all like on board and yeah, more in line with one another's thinking. So
I love that, Jenna. I wouldn't have thought of that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Be able to be part of it and see it. And as you said, even have the time to have the conversations, right? So yeah. I think we had a last talking point, which was just my observation. I think I was thinking again back to my earlier days, maybe my first several years even, and how I found that people kind of came into homeschooling community with a little bit of hesitation. And of course, it depends on who people are and what their personality is. But, I remember joining an in-person homeschool group, and probably the first, I would say maybe 2 or 3 years, I was just kind of edging in a bit. My kids were younger. In the end, I ended up co-facilitating the group. Like I eventually got very involved. But I did find that there was more of a holding back. And I don't think that was unusual. I think lots of families did that. And what I've noticed in these past couple of years is people just jumping in really good ways. I mean, Jenny, you talked about how you started a podcast, as a way of learning and, just finding out from people different perspectives. And prior to this, I feel like people who started podcasts had been at it for a long time. And I could be wrong, but that's how it feels to me. And then, there's just such a great, there's so much online information now. And a huge amount of it is from newer people. It's not just veteran people. So that's just been interesting to me, both and in person too. I think people jumped in. It's been harder to make connections, but as you said, Ashley, like you just knew you had to do it. So you went for it, right? Yeah. Whether you wanted to or not, it was like, oh, I've got to do this. And yes, it's a pandemic, but yeah. And I mean, I think people were uncomfortable. I think I was uncomfortable as well. But I don't know if I would have, I don't know. I don't know what it would have looked like. So that's just interesting to me as well, whether that has anything to do with the pandemic and the fact that there's just so much more virtual support, I think, from people. And maybe that's part of it. And there's kind of an energy that grows around that. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that, but it's been interesting to me. There's another, Jenna, there's of course your podcast, and the Homeschool Project podcast is another one that I've enjoyed. And their whole thing was kind of the same. They're learning as they go. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, Erin, are you suggesting like it was difficult for you to feel confident with your decision in homeschooling, or just like diving into a community of other people who are homeschooling, or both?
I think it was difficult. I think I felt good about my decision to homeschool. I think it took longer. So it could have been my personality, but I think I observed it with other people as well. I think it took longer to do things like jump into leadership positions. I don't remember anybody writing about homeschooling or unschooling, or, I mean, podcasting was maybe not as common, but it was around. I just don't remember people jumping in either publicly or even in leadership positions in the first few years. And I don't think that people felt as confident, I guess maybe in the theory and the philosophy. So you might feel comfortable in your own decision to homeschool.
Right.
But now, I'll sometimes read really, really, great thoughts in blog posts and podcasts. And I'm like, wow, this person's only been at this for 2 years. And they're speaking like with confidence and sometimes almost authority about it. And it's just interesting to me. So I don't know if some of it is even just the time. It might just be the era. It might not even be the pandemic. But yeah, there's just been an explosion of information. And it just seems like people are feeling more confident about it, which I think is great.
I think that has a lot to do with social media, probably in my very, like, you know, the time I'm taking to think about that right now. I feel like we're more confident sharing our lives. And I think that a lot of people, are, because they're sharing maybe more vulnerable things about themselves now on social media. It's become more trendy to be authentic, which is really nice and refreshing. But I think that yeah, you have like this sense of confidence, and whether it's real confidence or false confidence, it's still there, you know. And I think that may be influencing part of it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. And it's interesting. I do think people are, they've become comfortable being vulnerable digitally, right?
Mm-hmm. At least digitally.
So whereas you might have, 15 years ago, you might have waited for somebody to write a book. Now people are sharing thoughts really quickly and freely.
Yeah, I think I'd also add too that I really do wonder how much the pandemic played a role in it as well, because we all to some degree wanted to connect with other people just because we were isolated. But I think there was probably also that, okay, we can't connect with other homeschool families in person, but we can online. And it is so accessible in social media. I mean, Instagram, you can find homeschoolers on there like crazy. And then that connects you to this and this and this. Now there's the Clubhouse app, which I've been enjoying as well. So I think just being able to connect through all of that during the pandemic, probably some people were really just drawn to, and that worked for them. And it was a way to connect with others. And then I think what that made me think as well too, is I have found myself, like, as I enjoy learning about how we learn and self-directed learning, unschooling and home education, well, I feel so new and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I also want to share. Like, I also feel that, and I've had that in other areas of my life too in the past. So it's not random, I don't think, but you kind of want to start sharing. And now it feels pretty easy to share, I guess, even if it's just through like an Instagram post, that's super easy. And I mean, it's the topics exploded too, I think, because of the pandemic as well. So you're seeing other people share and talk about it, probably, then you're more likely to share more as well. But I think that piece is key too, like what you guys were talking about, like that being vulnerable, like more comfortable to be vulnerable to share. A lot of it is quite personal. And that's actually what I would say has held me back from only starting to share a little bit now, because I have found I've wanted to share. I've been, maybe this would be helpful to someone else, or even just wanting to share to connect with other people, but finding it a little bit hard to share something that feels personal and private about our family, and then trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do that? And I guess I take my time doing that. But I do think the pandemic probably played a big role in that, I think.
There's two things that come to mind when you were talking about that, Ashley, because first of all, I think you're right that people feel like they want to share, but even more in the immediacy to share. For me, I'm as you were talking about it, it came to me that I also had this feeling of like, I need everyone to treat their kids like this. Like, this is so important, because in our political landscape, and like the way that we're so polarized, it feels like a lot of the things that we, racism and sexism and childism are all related. And it felt like, this is like really important. This just I need to, if I influence one person, and they treat their children differently, and then those children treat their children differently, like it just felt like I had to spread the message, like that was part of it. So I don't know if other people, are doing it for that reason too, but it just felt like I have to, it's urgent. And then, Ashley, to speak to that whole personal thing, that's part of the reason that I needed to take a break, because it is so personal, and it's I don't know, it's hard to be on all the time and to always be sharing, because there are some really uncomfortable things that you experience, or there are things that are private and they don't give the context to your decision. So I feel like there were things that I couldn't say that I had to leave out because they're just personal. But then the decisions being made because of those personal reasons aren't fully, the public wouldn't understand or wouldn't know the full story. And not that I care what anyone thinks about what I'm doing. I really don't. It's just that if other people are trying to base their decision off of how I'm doing something, I want to be very careful about how I present myself online and in public spaces, because I don't want anyone to presume anything, and so that was challenging. And I felt like that was part of the reason I just needed to step back, and I did what I think was really important. And I do think that, it's helpful, but it's now come to an end. So, yeah.
No, I look at oh, sorry, Erin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ashley, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I look at people like Jenna and other podcasters, especially just other people in the community, Erin, you as well, who share their story in such a way that I admire, because we're not just sharing our story, we're sharing our family's story and our children's story. And I have been paying closer attention to, and thinking back to different podcast episodes I've listened to and stuff. And I think, wow, they've done this in such a respectful way that it still gave me what I needed as the listener and as the person consuming the information, but in a way that I perceived anyway as, not that I would worry if you disclosed too much to me, but I think it's something that's not easy to do. It sounds easy at first. I didn't even used to think about it before until I started sharing a little bit more of our story. And I thought, how did they do that? How did they do this while still respecting their children's privacy and their partner's privacy and stuff? So I think it's not an easy thing to do.
No. Yeah. And yeah, go ahead, Erin.
No, I was just going to say, there's so much in what you both said that just kind of jogging thoughts in my mind. And that's so true, Ashley. And Jenna, I hadn't thought about the fact that you're right. You have these 2 years of pandemic, and simultaneously you have loads of other political things happening. So people I think the decision to homeschool and unschool, is potentially political on some level anyway. And then you have all these things coming to the forefront. And so you're learning and you're able to just really see so many other things through a different lens as well. But it's really, I think it's wonderful to have outlets to be able to, send some messages and say some things and express some things. And at the same time, overwhelming, right? Overwhelming in your own energy level with sharing, and sometimes overwhelming, I think, for us all in what we're all taking in from other people as well. And Ashley, something you had said earlier about the fact that, people were wanting to connect, the whole kind of virtual explosion. People were maybe feeling lonely and just wanting to connect, and not just from a difficult perspective, but when you are growing and learning things, you want to share that with other people as well. And something that I think I hadn't fully taken into consideration, and I guess I'm going back a little bit on I said I was envious that, I felt like, oh, this would be so much easier to start homeschooling during the pandemic. But I hadn't realized, I think, how much people are still having to explain themselves or have some backlash. And I have heard, you had mentioned Kiki earlier, Ashley, and yes, she's done some really kind of interesting chatting about that and writing about that. And I kind of had this thought of like, really? These are the same things that I was answering, 18 or 19 years ago. So it's changed, but maybe not as much as I think it has. And opportunity to connect and support one another.
Yeah. And I think like what we're touching on here maybe is that it's like, what do they say? Like walking the beaten path or going off the beaten path, right? Like it's not mainstream. It always makes me think back. I find it so interesting that we're an unschooling family now, because I'm like, there's a real link here between unschooling families who also started off like that attachment parenting. I mean, there's all the different terms for that as well. And, that attachment parenting I still think wouldn't be considered mainstream. It's starting to feel that way to me because I've been so in it that I'm like, of course, that's the normal way of doing things. But I think, I have to even now still, very much so, make sure I spend enough of my time listening to the podcast, being involved in multiple unschooling communities, making sure every once in a while I'm reading a book on self-directed learning, because every time I do, it fuels me up. I'm like, right, this is what makes sense. This is why we do this. I need to hear from the other people. And then I'm like, okay, too much. I need to take a little bit of a mental break. And I've consumed a ton of information, which I've enjoyed, but it's putting the brakes on. And I take like a month or two or whatever, where I step away from it all. And I just need a break from it. And I'm sure, that's all that stuff's processing, but I always go back. I don't stay away for long. And I think part of it is because I don't have family members and friends around me living this way and making these choices. So I'm so grateful for Jenna taking the time to put a podcast together to learn how to do that. And like, Robin Robertson has the Honey, I'm Homeschooling podcast. Pam Lurikia has her podcast. Kiki's doing hers. I mean, there's so many that I've gained so much from and benefited from, that I then too start to think like you start to want to give back as well, because I think that helped us so much. So maybe if I share a little bit of my story, absolutely, it will help me, but maybe it will help other people as well. And Jenna, like going off what you were saying too, I do believe children and their parents and family members benefit from this so much. Not to say everybody should home educate and that's, the best thing for everyone. But I feel like I've described it before as like we've stumbled across this secret thing. Like I want to shout out, like, this is a possible option, like a real possible option. And it's so, I just constantly think about how a big reason we do this is putting mental health needs on top, so it was actually really interesting, Jenna, listening to you talk about how your daughter's gone back to school for mental health reasons. And it's a reminder that everyone's different with different needs and different experiences. But a big reason we feel very strongly now about keeping the option for our boys to continue unschooling. I mean, they always have the choice and the option to go back to school. That's my thought is, if they want to go to school, they're welcome to go to school. It's all about their choice, their life. But I want to be able to keep our situation where we can continue to invite them to stay home for as long as they want, because I think I just think about their mental well-being, and that might not be something that will be well taken care of if they're at school. So I think a big part of it is to knowing how great, and because I'm still in the school system teaching sometimes, and I see that it's not a perfect place and it has problems that a lot of us know about. And I see the kids that are wonderful and deserve all the opportunities in the world. And some of them are, fine. And then there's ones that you see that are really struggling. And you just think like, well, maybe if their parents, could learn a little bit about the whatever unschooling. And I know it's absolutely not an easy option for everybody to choose. And that's, I don't want to not acknowledge that, but I feel the same as you, Jenna, that it seems like when you learn this, you want to spread the word, like increase the awareness, and then people can do what they want with it.
Yeah. And I would add just one thing, that I think having all of these podcasts, books, blogs, all of that stuff, because it's like doubled since I even started researching it. I think it makes it more normal. Mm-hmm. And so that is great for unschooling, because when it feels really weird, or, you know, like you can't relate to anyone who's doing it. So for example, there are people in the unschooling community who I don't relate to mm-hmm. at all. Our parent, I mean, even if we both believe in unschooling, like their personality, their family life, like whatever it is, does not resonate. And so having people from all different walks of life and different backgrounds and different situations is only supporting the movement and helping other people find that person they relate to. So I was discouraged at the beginning starting a podcast, because I thought, well, oh my gosh, I mean, Pamela Rickia is doing an awesome podcast. Why do we need another podcast? But I thought, okay, you know, maybe not everybody like can relate to Pam, or, you know, maybe they're past teachers. And so like my story really resonates with them because they're an educator, and they can see like the things I stumbled on and the deschooling that I had to do, you know. So I just wanted to say that I think the more people talking about it and the more people writing about it, it's just so wonderful to see the boom and explosion and the different types of ways that people also interpret it and use it in their lives. So.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm aware of the time, so I do want to say this though, because you've both touched on it. And I think, Ashley, in the last piece that you said around just really wanting to share that information, and also acknowledging that it might not be a choice that everybody either can make, you know, or chooses to make at this particular time. But it doesn't mean that there aren't elements of it that they can really benefit from. So even if they're not in a situation that they could have their child home, you know, Jenna, as you alluded to earlier, you can still hold those same principles. And so your weekend time looks different, or your evening time looks different. And I would say even the expectations that people have of their children look different when they can take a step away and say, oh, okay, so we either can't do this right now, or we choose not to, or maybe my child chooses not to. But there are people, like lots of people, who, you know, the world's weight does not fall on whether my child gets an A or a B or a C or and there's just something to that, even if they can't do it in the moment. I feel like it has to take some pressure off to see people living with just a calmer, freer, more supportive attitude than often they're experiencing in the school system. So
I'll just add, there's a great podcast episode related to that specific thing. So if there's somebody listening, I want to send them over to that, because Megan from Unschool Files did a wonderful interview with, I think it's Nikolai, and I don't remember her last name, and I don't remember the details of the title or anything, but I'm sure you'll find it. It's, she talks about decentering school. And she talks about it from that frame of mind, like for parents who absolutely can't, or their spouse is absolutely opposed to unschooling or homeschooling, they can still take the principles and use it toward like homework or grading, or, you know, all of the things that might be stressing your child out or your family, creating friction in your family. So I just wanted to throw that in there for anyone who has more.
Yeah. And Jenna, I can just quickly add that. So I just pulled it up because I just listened to that.
Thank you.
I think it was the episode that you're referring to. So the Unschool Files podcast, which I think that's Megan's, right? Mm-hmm. Decentering School with Nikolai Pizarro.
Yes,
and it was really good.
It was so good.
And actually, I can quickly mention too that I think it's called Unschooling School. A lady in Toronto, her name's Heather. I think her name's Heather, but I don't remember her last name. I want to say she was on Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids podcast. And she, maybe about a year ago, roughly, she's based out of Toronto, and she's started this like movement, and I think it's called Unschooling School. That idea that kids can be supported in an unschooling way while they're in school. So there is some resources out there for people.
That's great. I'm going to have a peek. I know Pam Laricchia has done a couple as well. So I'll have a look at all those and maybe we can add them in. So good. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you
for inviting us. Yeah, thank you so much.
Good. I appreciate it. Okay. See you later.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. Erin can be found at Everlearning. And I, Ashley, can be found on Instagram at AshleyAsMama and at Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.